Hi, I'm Rachel here with my cat Leia, and I'm doing this week's Am Reading. Both of the books I'll be talking about primarily I mentioned in my January book haul, and one of them is on my anticipated reads list. I've had Human Acts on my anticipated reads list, but I actually was going to wait to read it until Goodreads, which through them I won this free copy, emailed me and said, hey, so we sent you this book, several weeks ago, but what up with the lack of review? And so I felt guilty. I know on BookTube people are kind of iffy about Goodreads. I hear a lot of, is it really that great of a site? And I don't go there that often, and I run into bad people, or I don't know, people just don't, feel it's all that necessary to their reading lives, but I'm pretty much the exact opposite. I pretty much live on Goodreads. I review every book that I read. It's my primary way of hopefully remembering them from the time that I read them. I check out giveaways like this one for books that I'm interested in. I rarely win them, but I enter them very happily. I'm part of groups where I lurk, but I do get information. I am a Goodreads librarian where I can edit records and add new ones, which is a lot of fun, especially when, like me, sometimes I read less popular stuff, like not classics, but stuff that was maybe written in the past and is not that good so that there isn't a record, or that just generally is from an indie press that isn't really well known at all. And so anyway, there could be lacks of cover art or incorrect bibliographic information, and I enjoy going in and fixing all of that. It's also the only area where I do any stats. Sometimes I think about doing more stats. I know Goodreads doesn't offer a whole lot on its own, but I get overwhelmed by everything I could be tracking, and then I don't do it. I figure I should be reading, and then when I want to look at some sort of stats, I go to Goodreads, and I see my most read authors. I always like checking in on that, and I also spy on that for other people about who they read the most often, and I look at my yearly counts about page counts and how the pie chart goes based on how I divvy my books into my shelves, and I look forward to all of the graphics that they send me about my reading, and I love the newsletters, and they send me whenever an author that I have read it comes out with a new book. And I know I sound like an infomercial, but I love Goodreads, and I've been fortunate, I guess, that I don't come across many bad apples on Goodreads. I'll often run into people with different opinions on books than me, but hey, that's life. Every morning I actually start my day by looking at my Goodreads feed and see what my friends are reading and rating and reviewing, and it's just a lot of fun. So anyway, when Goodreads emailed me, which is really just an algorithm email like that they'd send anybody, I felt like it was a personal affront. And I thought I needed to get on this right away, and it's a good thing that I did, because this is an incredible book. It just packs a really emotional punch. Kang really gets into the dark and the gritty in a very physical manner about this very violent event that happened in South Korea in 1980 with the student uprising that was violently suppressed. And luckily, the English translator Deborah Smith gave us a little bit of a preface to introduce readers who are not so familiar with this history with what's going on, because Kang obviously isn't here to hold our hand. She's here to give us the emotional output from the point of view of her characters, and it's just very deeply moving and deeply arresting. And I'm looking forward to having a significant time over the weekend to continuing to read this book. I thought I'd read you a little something from this writing, actually. Not so physically gory. I don't think she goes over the top, because she's describing something that is very physically violent and physically upsetting. But I thought I'd stick with something a little bit more on the esoteric emotional level. Something that actually describes this photo on the American cover of, these human ribs and the bird on top. Your childhood visits to her home inevitably included a quiet "follow me" as the elderly woman, her back bent into the shape of a Korean letter, led the way to the dark room that was used as a pantry. Then, you knew, she would open the larder door and bring out the cakes that were stored there to use as ceremonial offerings on the anniversary of a relative's death. Pastries made from oil and honey, and block-shaped cakes of pounded glutinous rice. You would take an oil and honey pastry with a conspirational grin, and your grandmother would smile back at you, her eyes creasing into slits. Her death was every bit as quiet and understated as she herself had been. Something seemed to flutter up from her face, like a bird escaping from her shuttered eyes above the oxygen mask. You stood there gaping at her wrinkled face, suddenly that of a corpse, and wondered where that fluttering winged thing had disappeared to. What about those who are now in the gym hall? Have their souls also escaped their bodies, flying away like birds? Where could they possibly be going? It surely wasn't some alien place like heaven or hell, which you'd heard about the one time you ever went to Sunday school, when you and your friends were lured there by the prospect of chocolate Easter eggs. You'd never been convinced by the historical dramas on TV, where the spirits of the dead were supposed to be scary figures, dressed in all white, and wandering around in an eerie fog, their disheveled hair the sign of unquiet rest. Next, I'll talk about Mother Box by Sarah Blackman. This is a collection of short stories, and I've read one so far. Sarah Blackman was a senior in college when I was a freshman, and she won a prestigious writing award from our alma mater, and as you can see, she made good use of it in her later years. She has this collection of short stories out. This is a very magical realism heavy collection, especially this first story, and it's not necessarily to my taste, although the writing is very beautiful. Here's the description from the back. The 11 stories in one novella of Mother Box and Other Tales bring together everyday reality and something that is dramatically not, and compelling narratives of new possibilities. In language that is both barb and bauble, bitter and unbearingly sweet, Sarah Blackman spins the threads of stories where everything is probable and nothing is constant. The stories in Mother Box and Other Tales occur in an in-between world of outlandish possibility that has become irrefutable reality. A woman gives birth to 7 babies and realizes at one of their weddings that they were all foxes all along. A girl with irritating social quirks has been raised literally by cardboard boxes. A young woman throws a dinner party only to have her elaborate dessert upstaged by one of the guests who, as it turns out, is the moon. Love between mothers and children is a puzzling thrum that sounds at the very edge of hearing, a muted pulse that nevertheless beats and beats and beats. In these tales, the prosaic details of everyday life, a half-eaten sandwich, an unopened pack of letters on a table, take on a fevered significance as the characters blunder into revelations that occlude even as they unfold. I know when it comes to BookTube, these sort of descriptive magical realism stories would definitely appeal to some of you very much. And I am looking forward to reading the rest of the collection, particularly the novella. I think I enjoy magical realism more in a longer form for it to unfold. Finally, I thought I'd talk about one book that I did finish this week. It is an audiobook, The Notorious RBG. It's a very short audiobook, 5 hours, which is the shortest that I've ever read as far as I can remember. But it does come packed with a lot of real information about RBG's formative years and her law school years and dealing with sexism and a little anti-Semitism and how her work took her into direct contact with racism and other forms of injustice. Some of the things I really appreciated about her story is how much she understands the idea of some sort of emotional equality, that for women to have more equality in public life, men need to be more supportive in the private life as caretakers to their families, as more than just breadwinners, but also responsible on an emotional and empathetic level. And the book also goes into her relationship, her friendship with Justice Antonin Scalia. And despite the fact that they sometimes vehemently disagreed on ideological matters, they could find some middle ground and a lot of stuff they had in common. I think it's a powerful message. It seems to be something she espouses herself, which is that you can't be enemies with everyone. You can't be angry all the time. You have to stand up and fight for what you believe in. But if you're against everybody, then it's not going to work. You're not going to impact any change, and you're not going to understand different points of view. I just think that's a really important message to hear, especially in these very polarizing times. The book also, in perhaps a millennial fashion, goes into a bit of detail about her workout session with her personal trainer, which puts me to a lot of shame. And it also goes into a moving account of her relationship with her late husband. I just found it to be a very emotional and moving audiobook, and because it was written by someone with a background in journalism, I remember from my own journalism school days, you write to a 5th grade level, so yay, I could understand it with minimal confusion, because I know I was flipping through RBG's actual memoir at a store one day, and I was getting a little freaked out by the legalese. I would definitely have to put a little more attention and concentration into that one. That's about it for me now. If you have anything you'd like to share about the books you're reading or the social media sites that you are unnaturally attached to, I'd love to hear about them. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.